Hi class, this is me, Giane Paulo Bargamento from 2nd year Bsed English, and today we're gonna talk about the preparation of classroom assessment. Okay, so what is objective in connect of preparation of classroom assessment? So, objective is a very helpful in structural planning during the teaching learning process and when assessing student progress. In structural objectives are often classified according to the kind or level of learning that is required in order to reach them. There are numerous taxonomies of instructional objectives. So, the most common taxonomy is developed by Benjamin Bloom. So, and his colleagues, the first level of the taxonomy is divided objective into three categories. So, the cognitive, the affective, and psychomotor domain. So, Sir Bargamento, what is the cognitive objectives? Well, class, the cognitive objective describes four outcomes of mental activities such as memorizing, reading, problem solving, analyzing, synthesizing, and drawing conclusions. So, it's usually involved in a mind. So, the cognitive domain is a knowledge too. So, Bloom and others further categorize cognitive objectives into various levels from the simplest cognitive task to the most complex cognitive task. It has three practical and structural levels, including fact, understanding, and application. So, the fact level is a single concept and uses verb like define, identify, and list. The understanding level puts two or more concepts together. So, the application level puts two or more concepts together to form something new. As I mentioned earlier about affective domain focus on emotions and values whenever a person seeks to learn to react in an appropriate way emotionally. So there is some thinking going on. So the way that people react on situations. So the three levels in affective domain is awareness, distinction, and integration. So the goal of the affective objectives is some kind of behavior or the product of an effect. So tests have also psychomotor objectives which focus on the body, and the goal is to control or manipulation of the muscular skeletal system or some part of it. So some examples are dancing, writing, tumbling, passing a ball, and drawing. The three practical instructional levels include imitation, practice, and habit. So the psychomotor domain is tapped in demonstration delivery, and the first level imitation will simply be a return of the demonstration under the watchful eye of a teacher. So the teacher is one of the person who observes the ability. So the practice level will be a proficiency building experience that may be conducted by the students without direct oversight of the teacher. So the habit level is reached when the students can perform the skills in twice the time that it takes the teacher or an expert to perform psychomotor. So psychomotor domain is more on fine or gross motor coordination, or it requires action by the test taker or even development of an output. So there are four components of an objective. So the behavioral and the conditions and the degree and the intended audience. So the verb use is the most important element of an objective and can never be omitted. So Benjamin Bloom and David Krathwohl were pioneers in categorizing the domain and levels for the learners to understand the right verb to be used. So the verb is categorized by domains of learning and various hierarchies. So and states precisely what the students will do in following instruction. So let's jump into principles of testing. So principles of testing: classroom teachers are expected to optimize the teaching, learning, and testing in consonance with the state's desire to provide learner-centered, standard-based, achievement oriented and data-driven schooling. So in the preparation of tests, the following principles must be reflected upon by every teacher. So number one, articulate targets, competencies. So in here, to improve effectiveness, teachers need to explicitly state their goals and objectives. Similarly, students will perform better when they are aware of the content and performance standard to be measured by the test. Appropriately designed tests reduce the uneasiness and anxiety experienced by students during assessment. So, there should be no room for surprise, whether in the covered content, so the method of answering, or the types of items. So, the degree of clarity with which the test items are constructed directly impacts how much the teacher have set their students for success. So, in other words, clarity of the assessment prepares learners for completing the task and subsequently better result. So number 2 is do no harm. So as test designer, teachers should avoid perceiving tests as an opportunity to emphasize who's in charge and who's more knowledgeable. So the principle to do no harm requires teachers to be mindful of the potential outcomes of the test structures and items. It is an ethical standard that demands academic integrity in assessment tasks, according to Gallivan 2017. So, too often teachers develop test items that may be confusing, tricky, logical, beyond the student's abilities, unrelated, silly, and punitive in nature. So, tests must be designed as honest measurement of learning, leading to the recognition of tests as an important responsibility in one's growth and development. So, next is number 3, which is avoid score pollution. So, teachers' preconceptions about testing are derived of their own vicarious experience as students. As students, they might have met teachers that have gave an unannounced test, added items not yet discussed in class, and administered a test when majority of the students are absent. So, consequently, when they become teachers, there is higher likelihood that they too will be polluting test scores as well. And also, teachers also tend to pollute scores by adding points for behaviors not necessarily related to content masters, writing the complete name of the teachers, neatness of the solution, representing the school in competition, submitting ahead of everyone, incentives for purchasing tickets and merchandise, etc. These malpractices diminished the authenticity of the assessment task. So, number 4, which is abstain from teaching to the test, is the overwhelming attention by various stakeholders on test score pushes teachers to heavily focus on preparing students for the test and providing instruction devoid of passion and meaning. So the use of practice exercises that were too similar to the question on the achievement and standardized test is described as teaching to the test. So in here, it explains that teaching to the test means overemphasizing concepts and skills that are highly likely to be tested. So this is illustrated by teachers that use actual test items or slightly altered test items to teach their students. Upon item teaching may improve students' performance on tests but fails to develop critical thinking skills. So let's jump into the task construction process. So here it explains that constructing a test or any assessment task generally consists of 3 steps. namely planning, preparing, previewing, and evaluating. So this illustrates this task. So identifying the purpose, planning. Number 2 is specifying the target outcomes. Number 3, preparing task specification. So I'll explain to the stages of test construction. In number 1, the first stage is planning is a critical step in developing valid and reliable tests. It has 3 sub-stages, namely identifying the purpose of the test, specifying the target outcomes, and preparing the table of specification or task. So, second step is preparing the test. Once the plan is set, the most challenging step is the writing of the test items with conscious adherence to the principles of appropriateness and alignment. Inattentiveness to the structures and details may lead to extremely easy or difficult tests. Next is the third step, which is reviewing the test. In this test, the test items are subjected to validation and reliability assessment. This entails both a qualitative and quantitative evaluation of the test by the teacher or her peers prior to administration. So let's jump into identifying the purpose of tests. So what is a test? So a test can be used for a variety of purposes. So it can be used to assess the entry-level proficiency, track progress learning during the teaching learning process, and determine the mastery level achieved by the students. So as a diagnostic tool, test result will divulge the extent of readiness of the learners to meet the demands of the new subject matter or course. So diagnostic tests should be prepared with emphasis to potential areas of difficulty. So as a formative assessment tool, tests will yield relevant information on immediate learning difficulties which teacher may utilize as basis for necessary remedies. So formal tests should be include the muddiest point and concepts that are prone to misconceptions. So as a summative assessment tool, tests are used to assign marks and to determine the level of mastery. So summative tests should encompass all the instructional objectives and content areas covered in the course. Hence, teacher must be attentive towards this feature while preparing a test. So in specifying the target outcomes, this explains that a set of detailed statements that specify the various things that learners are expected to do after successful completion of the learning process is called learning outcomes. So there are an articulation of the key knowledge, attitudes, and skill targeted in the instructions and assessment stages. So the test is intended to confirm whether or not the outcome has in fact been achieved. So consequently, the test has been a quality assurance instrument for monitoring achievement of the curriculum standards in terms of content and performance. To be fully comprehensive, tests must cover the various cognitive level of the revised Bloom's taxonomy. So in this way, summative tests should be constructed in accordance with the learning competencies designed to be achieved by the students in the curriculum guide in any particular learning episode. So test needs to be carefully planned to guarantee that they straightforwardly and dependently quantify what are intended to be measured. How to elicit this outcome through testing is an essential component of the planning phase of test construction. So when it comes to preparing the table of specific or TOS, so the table of specification, or TOS, is a matrix that serves as the teacher's guide in constructing a test. It is a blueprint that details what will be tested and how it will be tested. So the TOS specifies the learning content, competencies, and cognitive skills to be subjected to assessment. So the test designer should ensure that there must be an appropriate distribution of test items about all the topics covered in the teaching learning phase. So distribution of all items based on the instructional time allotted is deemed the most rational means of allocation. So that's all, guys. I hope you learned a lot of things today with regards the preparation assessment. So let's see you guys for another lesson tomorrow. Bye.